Hello, and welcome back to Owens Bay. In the last episode, I said I was going to be making a few shorter episodes over the holiday season. Well, that didn't work out. And here we have a regular length episode. This one was a bit of work to get done. Working on an area, I didn't really have a firm plan in my head of how to develop it, so it kind of evolved as I worked on it, and it turned out to be a pretty interesting location. And that location is going to be coming up into view right around this hillside here. It's the area of South Farwell. Everything you see below us here on the far side of the river, and a couple locations on the nearer side as well. All of this is going to get developed in this episode, and it's going to turn out to be a very unique place. Anyway, my name is Geifs, and let's get started. When I started working on this area, I didn't really have a very good idea of what I wanted to build here. My initial plan was just to take the area I built around Raven's Run and continue it into this area in the far southern end of the map. It is essentially almost on the edge of the map, not quite. And I was just going to essentially copy paste and call it a day. And as I worked on it, it kind of evolved into its own unique location with its own kind of unique backstory, and it was a rather fun process to work through. One of the first things I kind of crept into my head about wanting to do was changing the nature of this lake. Now, when I put in this lake, it was just when I initially made the map, and it was just something to be at the edge of the map, and I didn't really think much more about it than that. And while I was working on this area, the idea kind of came into my head of, what if we turned this into a reservoir? And in order to create the reservoir, I need a low dam. So this isn't going to be like a hydro dam. This is just going to be low to the ground. It's just we can maybe have a history where this was a fairly marshy area beforehand, and the original settlers came in and dammed it up to create a proper lake for, a water source. And over the years, that usage has essentially changed and it evolved over time. Now, what I'm using for the dam is I'm just going to put a few things together here to make up the dam. I'm using the narrow pedestrian path for the main part of the dam, or for the quay wall on one side. And I'm going to use some of these prop pillars to create some of the infrastructure, the actual dam. It's an earthen dam, so it's not like concrete or anything like that, but obviously there's going to be some concrete. And of course, as soon as I start building it, I get distracted and decide I have to put in a whole bunch of farmland. I don't know why I do that, but it is what it is. So there's still going to be a fair amount of farmland in this area. Some of it's going to be functional, some of it's going to be decorative. This one I'm working on right here, this is purely decorative. Most of what I'm doing here is really become my standard procedure of how to do rural areas on the map. I've kind of developed, I guess, a style, I suppose, and I tend to replicate it through most areas. This area, you know, geographically is very similar to Raven's Run, so it's going to visually look fairly similar to that area. As I work on the area and it basically takes on its own unique character, I think the main defining feature that separates this from the area of Raven's Run is this is a much wealthier area. This is going to be an area filled with, it might be a retirement community or expensive vacation homes. It's not a working class area on the map. This is adjacent to the town of Farwell, which is a tourist destination. This area, not quite the tourist destination that Farwell is, but as we get into the build, I'll explain the story I kind of developed for it. I think it's kind of fun. It's more maybe a resort community more for the local people than it is for tourists, like a local gem. All the tourists flock to Farwell to see the fake European downtown, and they tend to miss this area. I'm going to be playing around with the prop trees in this video. I'm using the apple tree. The apple tree is great because you can recolor just the apples and turn it into a flowering shrub. This particular shrub, we're going to call it a rhododendron. And unfortunately, I missed most of the construction of the dam, so I'm just going to include a little segment here. This is essentially it. It is, so there's several things going on here. Obviously, I'm using recolored boulders for the creek bed. I'm also using Sully's river texture with a green texture on top of it. It kind of has this slimy, mossy green look to it, which I thought would be interesting, you know, change up the nature of the streams and rivers a little bit with a few different textures. I think it worked pretty well. Obviously the prop pillars here for the structural elements of the dam, boulders embedded into the ground to kind of indicate that something was built. And Sully's wave textures on their side to create what appears to be water flowing down the spillway. Didn't work perfectly, but with the tools we have, it looks pretty good. Now, like I was saying earlier, I was planning on making a bunch of shorter episodes over the holiday season. I think my issue with this particular area on the map was I just didn't have a good place to cut it off or cut it up into smaller bits. It's essentially one big area that kind of evolved as I worked on it. So I didn't have a good cutoff point to break it up into smaller episodes. There is one final segment to this area of the map that needs to be worked on, and that is going to be spun off into its own episode. And you'll see some hints of what that might be in the closing cinematics at the end. Right now I'm just figuring out the basic road layout for this area of the map. The biggest change in this area is I decided to create another small little town here. I didn't plan for it. It just kind of, as I started working in the area and started getting a better sense of how much land was actually here, it just seemed like a perfect place to add another small little village. I suppose since it's North America, we might be more realistic to refer to it as small little town. In my mind, at least for the area I'm familiar with, a village is more an area that it might be a collection of houses, maybe a couple of shops, but nothing else. And this is a little larger than that, so this might fit in the definition of a small town. I'm going to use some of the surfaces to add a bit of variety to the farms here so they don't all look identical. This one in particular, I'm not particularly sure I like it, but I just left it. Right now, I'm just drawing in the basic road layout for the town. It's very small. It's essentially just one main street, a few commercial buildings, and a collection of houses. Because I'm not really, at this point, I'm not really certain what I'm building. It kind of just goes in a more haphazard kind of way as I kind of like feel my way through it. On this side of the lake, this is where I'm planning on putting most of the expensive homes. They're either vacation homes, retirement properties, those sorts of buildings. So obviously the property values on this area are pretty high. I didn't plan on building anything on this side of the river, but when I started working on it, it just seemed logical to finish off the entire south end of the map here and just have it finished and not have to come back to it, or at least as much as possible. Like I said, a lot of these fields, not a lot of them, but a few of them are just decorative. This one is a decorative one. This is quite common actually. I have like hay fields that don't have any farm associated with them, or at least not directly. Obviously somebody owns the property and they cut down the fields for the hay, but they don't have houses, they don't have barns or anything like that associated with them. Somebody will just show up and cut it all down. My big challenge with farms is to try to incorporate them into the map so they feel organic. Like it feels like just a natural flow of the landscape from town to countryside without any abrupt changes. Obviously, there are urban areas where that happens, and I will probably have some examples of that on other parts of the map, but this is meant to be a purely rural area. I really do like these UK detached homes. They add so much more variety to the buildings available, and with a few alterations, they are quite usable in a North American build. I think that the big giveaway with them, the big tell that they're not North American, is probably the orange roofs. And obviously you can recolor them to make them blend in a bit more. I don't end up doing this for all the houses. It's, a considerable amount of work, but if it is something that bothers you, that is an option, and it works quite well. Once again, this isn't a particularly highly detailed area. There are obviously parts that are more detailed than others, but we got to keep in mind this is like literally on the edge of the map, so it's essentially backdrop, but it's also fun to make it unique and nice looking as well. As I'm working through this area and the idea of it being a local tourist destination, or not tourist destination, but kind of a resort area or where the locals go for day trips, I thought it would be fun to put in a public beach here on the lake. For this particular lake, I didn't really want the rocky bottom. So what I'm going to do here is I'm first going to use the mulch texture to give it more of a muddy appearance, which is what I'm doing right here. And over top of that, I'm going to put the forestry surface. And because the forestry surface is partly transparent, the mulch surface will show through. The forestry surface will add a bit of like green and stuff, so it kind of looks like a slimy lake bed, algae, that sort of stuff. Of course, you can't see most of it under the water, but you definitely can make it out along the edge of. And a public beach needs a raft that everybody can swim out to. I thought it'd be fun if the raft had a slide on it. This particular public beach is kind of like a city park, so it's obviously maintained. It has a lawn that gets mowed. Now, I wanted a building for the washrooms, the change rooms, that sort of thing, and I found the pump house. This is the buildings that are turned into props, and it really does, the look of it is perfect. There are some pipes on the far side. We're going to just pretend they're not there. You can't really see them anyway. Right here, I'm embedding some of these food stalls into the side to kind of work as a concession stand. This sort of works. It's not perfect. I had a bit of issues with the game and had to reinstall a bunch of mods. I am missing the one that allows you to change the colors of the net lane items, and so they're going to look a little funky. I'll have to come back and fix that. I'm considering downloading Sully's prop people to fill in some of these areas. They need something happening. Needs a bit of life happening. Right now what I'm doing is, this is the downtown strip for the small village town. I'm going to use this modded school building here as not sure what to really refer to it. The way I'm imagining this town, it's too small for a city hall, so this might be the civic center, community library, maybe a town hall, but not a formal city hall in that sense. And it will function as a school for the area. It's way over capacity, but that's okay. I'm going to be using some of the UK building assets here for the downtown. The smaller scale makes them much more suitable for this. Because I didn't really have a firm plan in my head of what I'm building here, I'm just zoning a bunch of stuff and letting it come in just to see what it looks like. At the end of the video, I'm going to come back in here and organize it a bit better. Right now, it says rudimentary. It's just I get some buildings down so I can get used to the idea of this being an actual small town. For the soccer field, I didn't really want like this big field with all the bleachers and all that, so I'm going to delete it all the way and just have only the field. At the very far end of the map, I wanted to kind of play around with more water features or wetlands types of landscapes. And when I came up with the idea that this was essentially a man-made reservoir, there's obviously might be a section of it that was flooded out at some point, and that's what I'm building at the far end of the lake here. So this is an area of the map that would have been dry land, but when the reservoir filled up, it flooded. To create this, I'm going to be using the prop trees so I can recolor them. This is essentially the idea I had for the wetlands. I'm still playing with it. I'm still working through it. There's more to be kind of figured out of how to make this look the best it can. The idea here would be that the submerged plants would be distressed or dying because they're not meant to be in the water. Trying to get the colors correct is quite challenging. A different system for altering the colors, I think, might be useful. The one we have is great. Don't get me wrong. Recoloring is great, but sometimes getting fine variations in colors is challenging. And we're going to use dead spruce trees to indicate that, yeah, part of the forest here was flooded out and died. Overall, I really like the idea. My only issue with it is it's probably a little too vibrant, the color palette. Like I said, I'm still playing around with it, so that will evolve as I figure out different things I can use this for. I think they're really quite good. It gives you a lot more variety in the types of plants you can have, even though we're just basically recoloring the plants that come with the game. But, you know, any variety at this point is a good thing. Right here, I'm placing and detailing the vacation homes alongside the lake. Fairly basic detailing. Essentially, all I'm really doing is deleting away most of the props I'm building and putting in my own lawns and yards to give them more space, make them look more integrated into the actual landscape. I thought it would be fun if the houses along the lake had their own private docks. If I had boats, that would be a lot of fun to put in here. If we do get boats in the near future, I'm probably going to come back and revisit this lake and add them in. But for the moment, no boats. I'm going to be putting in small pockets of industry, essentially clusters of 2-3 buildings, but no more. I don't want major industrial areas in this part of the map, but also I need a little bit of industry to create some jobs for the people who live here. These homes are far outside the main city, so plenty of room to spread out. Property values are not particularly high, so we're going to get some big, huge mansions and some really large yards out here. This is an asset I wasn't really planning to use on this map at all. It's a beautiful asset, but the style of the church, I don't know if it's North American, but I don't really have another option, and I put it down and it seemed to fit in quite well. My only gripe with it is I really wanted to delete the walls and expand the graveyard a bit. You can't do that with that asset, unfortunately. And when I put down that asset, the idea of what this town might be about sort of start to come into focus. Here I'm putting on a stage. I'm going to attach it to a barn, kind of make it an outdoor venue for concerts, maybe Shakespeare in the park, that sort of thing. And it's when I'm building this, plus the church, and plus what I'm building on the far side of the lake, which will be next episode, the idea kind of comes to me that the main industry for this town is weddings. We have a beautiful church, we have abundant outdoor areas, and we're going to have some very unique features around the lake that are going to make that, it's going to be the wedding destination area. The area right around the church, I really wasn't sure what to do with it, so I'm essentially turning it into parkland. I didn't want to let the town grow too large in size. I definitely wanted it to be a very small place. right here, I'm building another little pocket of industry. I downloaded a mod that had more waste disposal options, and I found a unique one that I'm going to include in this little area right down here. It essentially is a very, very tiny recycling depot. And for a rural area like this, that would be something that would be fairly common. It would be probably referred to as a transfer station, if I remember. Here it is right here. This would be like a transfer station. Now this has a dump truck associated with it. If this was a real transfer station, this would be a location where the residents would have to drive to dump off their recycling. There wouldn't be any local pickup, but it's the right size, and I thought it would be kind of fun to include it here. This gas station's right on the main highway. Trying to, build out areas so the suburban area, or as you drive into the city, as things just kind of build up gradually, is an interesting kind of challenge. Like, to make it look like it doesn't, like it looks right. It doesn't look like it's just like this abrupt, all of a sudden there's an abrupt start to the city. So kind of like spreading everything out a bit more. It's a interesting challenge. Right now I'm packing in a few more buildings into the main street here. What I'm finding is the density is just, it's too spread out. Sometimes the zoning just doesn't really give you the look you want. And what I decided to do for this town is to start using Move It to kind of, move buildings around and just kind of pack them in a little tighter. It's not something I do a lot of. I try to allow the zoning to take care of most of the work for me, but after doing it on this map, I think it might be something I might do more of in the future, because the results are just so much better than just letting the game zone its own buildings. Visually, it just looks much, much better to hand place them. I don't want to obviously do that everywhere. I think there's going to be more locations where I'm going to start doing it for sure. Now this turned out to be a real pain in the butt to actually get to work. Every time I tried to do these little alterations on the textures, get them to conform more to the edge and stuff, you can actually see it's shifting around and changing directions. And obviously I want them all to go in the same direction. So this turned out, and there's one where I just gave up and just left it. That turned out to be far more work than it needed to be, and a lot of frustration with it as well. And here's where I start shuffling the buildings around. It's amazing how much more space you can find when you just pack things in a way that makes much more sense visually. Also, what's nice here is it gives this little tiny town a really dense center where all the houses are located, and then very quickly this fades off into more rural settings. But I really kind of like the look of it being super, super dense in its center. And the oldest detailing trick in the book, adding lots and lots of trees to hide all the jankiness. I'm using some of the Japanese assets here to create some more modern townhomes, kind of indicating that even though this is kind of a small, sleepy town in some sense, property values are starting to pressure new development in the area. And now I'm just going to spend a bit of time just adding the final trees, a few extra houses. And that pretty much brings us to the end of this episode. Now, this little town needs a name. I have no idea what to call it. So if anybody has any suggestions out there, please let me know. I'm more than happy to consider them. If you have stuck around to the end of the episode, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Watching to the end, certainly helps the algorithm promote this video to more people. So I do really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy what I work on. And I'll see you all in the next episode. Take care.